Okay. So we talked about questioning this week. We generate questions before we read, while we're reading, and after we read. And we always ask questions 24/7. That means all the time. So questioning, we have thinking stems. We say, I wonder, what if, why, how could, I don't understand, it confused me. When I say write a question, I want you to use a question word at the beginning and do an asking sentence with a question mark. So these are some of the words you can start your question with. Where, am, is, could, how, why, does, did, whose, okay, are. So I'm going to show you the cover of a book. And you're going to write here, we're going to ask a question before we start reading. And here's where your question's going to go. And here's even some examples of what you can start with. Who, when, what, why, how, where. So this says before reading. So we're only going to put one question right here. Right here you're going to put your question. You're not going to answer it yet, so you don't know the answer. So you're just going to put a question. So I'm going to show you the book I'm going to read. And I want you to write a question right there. And you can use these question words. But here's the book we're going to read. Sylvester and the Magic Pebble. So write your before question there, right here in this box. Looking at the cover, what would be a question you might ask? Go ahead and write it in that box. What's a question that you would ask before we start reading? 2 questions. Xavier, what was your question? Is this story fiction or nonfiction? Okay. I think we can almost answer that one with Steve, couldn't we? Almost. All right, Gracie, what was yours? What kind of magic do they do? She's using that word magic in the pebble. She wants to know what kind of magic they do. Okay, very good. Now, as I'm reading, you could answer your question over here. If you find the answer, write the answer. Okay? So if I'm reading it and you decide it's fiction or nonfiction, you could write the answer here and tell me why. So it's fiction because, or it's nonfiction because, or Gracie could tell me what's magic here once she figures it out, what kind of magic their magic is, and she could tell me. And then while I'm reading the story, if you come up with a question while I'm reading, you can write it right here. Any question, but it has to be a question. And then if you find the answer, you're going to write it right here. Okay? So I'm going to read Sylvester and the Magic Pebble. This is one of my favorite stories. Sylvester Duncan lived with his mother and father at Acorn Road in Oakdale. One of his hobbies was collecting pebbles of unusual shape and color. On a rainy Saturday during vacation, he found a quite extraordinary one. It was flaming red, shiny, and perfectly round like a marble. As he was studying this remarkable pebble, he began to shiver, probably from excitement, and the rain felt cold on his back. I wish it would stop raining, he said. To his great surprise, the rain stopped. It didn't stop gradually as rain usually do. It ceased. Ceased means stopped suddenly. The drops vanished on their way down, the clouds disappeared, and everything was dry, and the sun was shining as if rain had never existed. In all his young life, Sylvester had never had a wish gratified so quickly. It struck him that magic must be at work, and he guessed that the magic must be in the remarkable-looking red pebble. So the magic's in the pebble, where indeed it was. To make a test, he put the pebble on the ground and said, I wish it would rain again. Nothing happened. But when he said the same thing, holding the pebble, then in his hoof, the sky turned black, there was lightning and a clap of thunder, and the rain came shooting down. What a lucky day this is, thought Sylvester. From now on, I can have anything I want. My father and mother can have anything they want. My relatives, my friends, and anybody at all can have everything anybody wants. He wished the sunshine back in the sky, and he wished a wart on his left behind Fetlock would disappear, and it did. And he started home, eager to amaze his father and mother with his magic pebble. He could hardly wait to see their faces. Maybe they wouldn't even believe him at first. So now he's found this magic red pebble. So did you find the answer to your first question? If you did, write the answer. Do you have another question so far about what's going on? Write a question if you have a question right now. Maybe you're wondering what's going to happen next. Now don't say that, but maybe say what's going to happen when he goes to his home, or what's going to happen with that pebble. If you think of a question, ask it. If you don't have one yet right here in the middle, then you need to put one. We're not to the end yet, so you cannot put a question here yet. So you only have to think of one during reading. If you find the answer as I'm reading, put the answer here. Okay. Let's keep going. As he was crossing Strawberry Hill, thinking of some of the many, many things he would wish for, he was startled to see a mean, hungry lion looking right at him from behind some tall grass. He was frightened. If he hadn't been so frightened, he could have made the lion disappear. Or he could have wished himself safe at home with his father and mother. He could have wished the lion would have turned into a butterfly or a daisy or a gnat. He could have wished many things, but he panicked. Have you ever panicked before? Got really scared and you did something you didn't want to do? And he couldn't think. Because when you get panicked, you can't think right carefully. I wish I were a rock, he said. And he became a rock. The lion came bounding over, sniffed the rock 100 times, walked around and around it, and went away confused, perplexed, puzzled, and bewildered. I saw that little donkey as clear as day. Maybe I'm going crazy, he muttered. See the pebble? And there was Sylvester, a rock on Strawberry Hill, with the magic pebble lying right beside him on the ground, and he was unable to pick it up. Remember, he has to hold it for it to be magic. Oh, how I wish I were myself again, he thought. But nothing happened. He had to be touching the pebble to make the magic work. But there was nothing he could do about it. His thoughts began to race like mad. He was scared and worried. Being helpless, he felt hopeless. He imagined all the possibilities, and eventually he realized that his only chance of becoming himself again was for someone to find the red pebble and to wish that the rock next to it would become a donkey. You think anyone would do that? Find a pebble and wish it would become a donkey? Probably not. Someone would surely find the red pebble. It was so bright and shining. But what on earth would make them wish that a rock were a donkey? The chance was 1 in a billion at best. Sylvester fell asleep. What else could he do? Night came with so many stars. Meanwhile, back at home, Mr. and Mrs. Duncan paced the floor, frantic with worry. Sylvester had never come home later than dinner time. Where could he be? They stayed up all night wondering what had happened, expecting that Sylvester would surely turn up by morning. But he didn't. Of course, Mrs. Duncan cried a lot, and Mr. Duncan did his best to soothe her. Both longed to have their dear son with them. I will never scold Sylvester again as long as I live, said Mrs. Duncan, no matter what he does. At dawn, they went about inquiring of all the neighbors. Okay, so if you have a question, you're writing it here. We haven't written any questions here yet, because this is after reading, so that's when we're done reading. So we haven't got there yet. They talked to all the children, the puppies, the kittens, the colts, the piglets. No one had seen Sylvester since the day before yesterday. They went to the police. The police could not find their child either. They couldn't find him. All the dogs at Oatsdale went searching for him. They sniffed behind every rock and tree and blade of grass, into every nook and gully of the neighborhood and beyond, but found not a scent of him. They sniffed the rock on Strawberry Hill, but it smelled like a rock. It didn't smell like Sylvester. After a month of searching the same places over and over again and inquiries of the same animals over and over again, Mr. and Mrs. Duncan no longer knew what to do. They concluded that something dreadful must have happened and that they would probably never see their son again, though all the time he was less than a mile away. They tried their best to be happy, to go about their usual ways, but their usual ways included Sylvester, and they were always reminded of him. They were miserable. That life had no meaning for them any more. they're just sad. Uh-oh, now what is it? Fall. Night followed day, and day followed night, over and over again. Sylvester on the hill woke up less and less often. When he was awake, he was only hopeless and unhappy. He felt he would be a rock forever, and he tried to get used to it. He went into an endless sleep. The days grew colder. Fall came with the leaves changing color. Then the leaves fell, and the grass bent to the ground. Then it was winter. The winds blew this way and that. It snowed. Mostly the animals stayed indoors, living on the food they had stored up. One day a wolf sat on the rock, that was Sylvester, and howled because he was hungry. Then the snows melted, the earth warmed up in the spring sun, and things budded. Leaves were on the trees again, flowers showed their young faces. And what? Yep, it's still there. One day in May, Mrs. Duncan insisted that his wife go with him on a picnic. Let's cheer up, he said. Let us try to live again and be happy, even though Sylvester, our angel, is no longer with us. They went to Strawberry Hill. Mrs. Duncan sat down on the rock. The warmth of his own mother sitting on him woke Sylvester up from his deep winter sleep. How he wanted to shout, Mother, Father, it's me, Sylvester. I'm right here. But he couldn't talk. He had no voice. Because he's a stone, right? It says he was stone dumb. He can't talk. Brooks can't talk. Mr. Duncan walked aimlessly about while Mrs. Duncan set out the picnic food on the rock. Alpha sandwiches, pickled oats, sassafras salad, Timothy compote. Suddenly, Mr. Duncan saw the red pebble. What a fantastic pebble, he exclaimed. Sylvester would have loved it for his collection. He put the pebble on the rock. They sat down to eat. Sylvester was now as wide awake as a donkey that was a rock could possibly be. Mrs. Duncan felt some mysterious excitement. You know, Father, she said suddenly, I have the strangest feeling that our dear Sylvester is still alive and not far away. I am, Sylvester wanted to shout, but he couldn't. If only he had realized that the pebble resting on his back was a magic pebble. Now, you should us on this lovely May day, said Mrs. Duncan. Mr. Duncan looked sadly at the ground. Don't you wish to too, Father? She said. He looked hard at her as if to say, how can you ask such a question? Mr. and Mrs. Duncan looked at each other with great sorrow. I wish I were myself again. I wish I were my real self again, thought Sylvester. And in less than an instant, he was. Do you remember what his dad did with the pebble? What did his dad do with the pebble?
He picked it up and
The dad did wish, but it didn't come true. Why? Where was the pebble? On the rock. So when Sylvester said it, he was touching the pebble, right? Because it was on the rock. So he became the donkey again. You can imagine the scene that followed. The embraces, the kisses, the questions, the answers, the loving looks, and the fond exclamations. They don't even care that their food's all over the ground. When they had eventually calmed down a bit and had gotten home, Mr. Duncan put the magic pebble in an iron safe. Someone had asked what he's going to do with the pebble. There's your answer. He put it in an iron safe. Someday they might want to use it, but really for now, what more could they wish for? They all had all that they wanted. They had each other. The end. So, think of a question that you want to ask now that the story's over. Okay? What do you think? What do you want to write as this question for the end of the story? What do you want to ask, Chase? Now that the story's over, what would you want to ask?
why did he put the pebble in the iron safe?
Okay, why did he put the pebble in the iron safe? What will his next, what? Pebble be? What will be the next rock he collects? Very cool. Gracie? Will they get the pebble back out? Sadie? Why did they want to put it in the safe? Emma? Okay, will they write another book about what they're going to wish for? Will they use the pebble again? So you can use any of those questions that our friends just said, or you can make up your own one. Now, are we going to know the answer? No, but we can use our schema and what happened in the story to make a guess, right? So you can say, I think so question was, will they use the pebble again? I think they will because, or I think they will not because. So tell me what you think. Or why did they put it in the safe? Tell me, I think they put it in the safe because. Tell me why. So give me an I